The Ottoman Empire, keeper of the gates of three continents and for a century, holder of quite possibly the most lucrative trade routes in the world at the time, currying goods and culture between Europe, Africa, and Asia in a role no other nation could match or would match until the discovery of the New World. The New World and its discovery, as a matter of fact, served as one of the instrumental nails in the coffin of the Ottoman Empire. The European powers, being the lands of Christendom, were growing tired of enriching the Islamic Empire of Turkey, aside from also wanting to cut out an expensive middleman, thus developing one of the chief goals of Columbus's expedition: discover a quicker route to Asia and cut the Ottomans out of the loop. While Asia wasn't reached, the Americas proved even more valuable a find, opening up the powers of Europe to a hub of resources that would vastly saturate the markets and devalue Ottoman goods. Certainly not entirely, as Asian trade still brought a lot of exclusive product you couldn't find in the Americas, but interest shifted from that which was expensive and old to new and free. The Ottomans throughout this process never gave much consideration to the Americas and had other plans on their agenda, primarily fending off rival powers from Persia and even within themselves, as the Ottoman state had yet to be fully centralized and was in essence composed of numerous vassal states, one might even say like a better rounded Holy Roman Empire. And aside from that, the Ottomans were also developing ports in the Indian Ocean, yet despite all of this, the Ottomans did have the opportunity to establish colonies in the Americas. Depending on the time frame, the Ottomans did hold naval superiority for about 100 years after the discovery of the Americas. And during this time, much of the American coasts were still up for grabs. It wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility for the Ottomans to passively colonize a region of the Americas, sending a few colonists there to a coast and allowing them to develop mostly on their own, while the Sultan and his government focused primarily on domestic matters. One of the biggest hurdles for the Ottomans would plainly be access to the Atlantic, as the only real means for the Ottomans to escape the Mediterranean would be to blast past Spain, or route ships southward around Africa, which might simply take too long. In our world, a port in the Atlantic would have been gained during the Ottoman campaigns in Morocco. However, Morocco had successfully repelled the Ottomans and thus left American colonization, due to the lack of a direct port, simply inconvenient. But what if things had gone differently? What if the Ottomans conquered Morocco, either through success in earlier campaigns or by using the victory of their supported side in the Battle of the Three Kings to justify an annexation? The Moroccan Sultan whom the Ottomans supported did die soon after, which opens the door for a union of the two. Funny enough, almost identically to the situation Portugal had found itself in, as their king had died in battle with no immediate heir. The Spanish king thus assumed the Portuguese throne and established the Iberian Union. In turn, the Battle of Three Kings could spell a similar union between the Ottoman Empire and Morocco in this world. The result is that ports to the Atlantic are now readily accessible, and colonization is now convenient. Convenience is what would be most important for the Ottomans in the case of colonization, as while the discovery of the Americas was certainly something of interest, the Ottomans couldn't be bothered with it when they had such a reliable revenue source and what they believed more important matters to deal with. What this essentially adds up to is that the Ottomans have more important things to do, and any attempt at a colony would just be a passive endeavor, not at all something that would justify the same level of investment and rivalry that arose from Europe. So let's assume that sometime between 1570 and 1600, with Iberia laying mass claim to vast amounts of land and the stories of untapped wealth within these lands reaching the Old World, the Ottomans, as the English and French had, decide to jump on the bandwagon, setting course for North and South America, and landing in the regions of both Guyana in the south and Virginia in the north. Of course, a direct Ottoman port into the Atlantic opens up a whole set of unintended consequences. Piracy, for one. The Barbary pirates of North Africa were infamous for their raids and enslavement of Christians to sell to the Ottomans. In our world, they were mostly confined to the Mediterranean, only occasionally drifting into the Atlantic and even going as far as to raid the coasts of Iceland. However, in this world, the floodgates are wide open for more pirates to operate freely in the Atlantic, moreover with the protection of Ottoman ships now making rounds in the ocean. During this period of time, the Ottomans faced a major land crisis as their population had grown to immense proportions, leading the government to further encourage private expeditions to the New World, promising wealth and fertile land, when in truth they had no idea if that would be the case. These early ventures would bring populations of hunters, traders, and missionaries, as well as all manner of skilled workers to begin constructing new settlements, and it would be in these lands where they would encounter the tribes of the Powhatan in the north and the Kalina in the south, both of whom they could certainly do trade with, and much as was seen during the Islamization of Indonesia, the religion would be promoted to the natives, especially to their leaders and elite. Some of the Ottoman settlers, taking indigenous wives so their children raised in the faith, could more easily spread it among the tribe as well, likely leading the Ottoman colonists into a similar situation the English had faced, of the Powhatan sieging their settlement in retaliation for what came to be perceived as an incursion upon their land. Without significant and immediate support from the empire itself, the settlers, if any survived the raid, would likely flee to neighboring English lands or even mount a voyage for the Guyanese colony, which would have proven more successful, leaving the northern Ottoman colony abandoned and later absorbed by English Virginia. The Kalina people, who were known for traveling and exploring the dense forests and rivers, made excellent gatherers and locators of precious stones and metals, which the Ottoman settlers then mined and extracted. The Ottomans would gradually assimilate the Kalina people by converting them and encouraging missionary groups composed of natives to spread the faith outward towards Spanish colonies for the sake of causing trouble for their competition. Again, much like Indonesia, this would lead the religion to spread quite rapidly throughout the continent, especially in underdeveloped regions where Spanish Catholicism didn't reach. The Ottomans, thanks to this colony, have solved the population dilemma, and while it did substantially boost the development and manpower of New Turkey, the empire itself saw a reduction to its own armed forces, in essence having split its army in two and separating it by the Atlantic, a very good arrangement for the colony, who would absolutely need this level of support in as unfriendly a neighborhood as the Catholic-occupied New World. Though officially this would be an Ottoman colony, because of passive colonization, the region of Guyana would be mostly self-governing, and serve as something more of an outpost for Ottoman ships to dock, resupply, and launch off, likely leading to smaller Ottoman ports littering the African west coast, and creating a nice accessible trail for Ottoman ships to launch from the east and avoid the European fleets by port hopping around Africa. Something which would become increasingly necessary as the European powers would have by this point reasserted dominance of the Mediterranean, and begun harassing Ottoman ships and port cities in Morocco, which may soon cost the empire this realm which has served as its sole port into the Atlantic. In our timeline, the major motivator for the Portuguese in the Battle of the Three Kings was to open up a front to launch a crusade in North Africa, because in this world Ottoman presence in the Atlantic is more significant, as well as accompanied by the rise of numerous Turkish and Arabian pirates privateering under the Ottoman flag. The European powers are now more inclined to act against this force which is stepping outside of its boundaries. A temporary alliance is called of the Catholic Mediterranean powers, akin to the original Holy League, which beat the Ottomans back decades earlier. This team that was really just made up of Spain and Portugal would align itself with the new Holy League composed of the Holy Roman Empire, Austria, Poland, Lithuania, and Russia, ultimately escalating what had been the Great Turkish War of our world. The new coalition invades the coast of Morocco and blockades the Strait of Gibraltar. Ottoman territory in the Balkans and Caucasus sees invasion by the forces of Russia, Poland, and Austria, forcing the Ottomans to defend both the European front and the North African front, both of which are quickly whittled down before the Turks can remobilize and hold their ground where they now stood. An attack of this scale wasn't expected. The coalition of our timeline alone was overwhelming enough as it was, but because the Ottomans became ever more present in the affairs of Spain and Portugal, the two put aside any past differences for the sake of ending their shared enemy. The French, however, would be the odd men out, as yes, they would also be pestered by Turkish pirates. However, officially the French were allies of the Ottomans and thus would sit this battle out, though that wouldn't stop French volunteers from lending their support to the Holy League. Just as in our world, the Ottomans are defeated and greater land concessions are made, not only in the Balkans but also in North Africa. Overseas, Ottoman Guyana would have come under siege by Portuguese Brazil and Spanish Venezuela. However, with the significant backing of the native population and a stronger independent military on account of self-governance, the Ottoman colony is able to fend off most pushes and hold its ground, though the conditions of this treaty still cost this colony its coastline. Something it simply isn't willing to accept, and thus officially declares independence from the Ottoman Empire, and pushes out the Spanish and Portuguese occupiers. And though Guyana would become independent, it would still revere the Ottoman Sultan as Grand Caliph, similar to how the Australians or Canadians had for a long period still held loyalty to the British Crown, despite being sovereign. With many major Ottoman ports in the Atlantic now defunct, abandoned, or handed over to the European powers, many Turkish or Arabian pirates would rely on Guyana as a hub of operation, and potentially spark an early Barbary war by sacking ships, taking hostages, and enslaving crew members of American, British, and Spanish vessels. What we're left with is an independent Turkish state in what would have become Guyana, with ties to numerous pirate organizations. Unlike the independent colonies of our world, this colony likely becomes another sultanate, as it wouldn't have been significantly influenced by the European Enlightenment. The Islamic population of this colony would likely clash with future independent South American states, or may instead gain some allies and even new territory if Islamic identity in South America becomes synonymous with anti-imperial pro-independence movements, in which case regions like Venezuela, interior Brazil, and Peru could convert and unite into one large Amazonian Turkish Islamic state. Spain in this world retains Morocco and sets about its plans of establishing a greater Spanish Sahara, a project that might pick up more steam once its American colonies break away and ports in the Mediterranean become a more appealing source of wealth. The Ottomans, though reduced of territory, may not be in the worst of conditions. As a matter of fact, this may well serve to benefit the empire, as it now holds fewer divisions and can instead focus on greater integrating the vastly different populations of its land, triggering an early Tanzimat period in which consolidation of social and political foundations can begin, alongside modernization projects and reforms, which could prevent the rising divisions which led to the empire's later decline by establishing a more uniform Ottoman identity and a sense of community. And that is where I'll end this video for now. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Support your Legion by liking the video, check out our website usofz.com, or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.